All right, welcome back to tutorial number 3. This is going to be the instructions for the falling game. By now you should have a pretty good understanding about how Scratch works and how to maneuver around in it, so this game is going to be a little bit more advanced. It's going to kind of build off what we've already done in the past two games. So the object of this game is going to be having something fall from the sky towards the top of the screen. It's going to fall down and you are going to try to use the arrow keys to move something back and forth to catch the object that's falling from the sky. So, to get started, we are going to go ahead and choose an item to fall from the sky. So, to do so, we're going to click down here and click Choose a Sprite as we have been. Now, you may want to do something that would be falling from the sky. So maybe you would want to do something round like a baseball or a basketball or an apple or something. I'll leave it up to your imagination. You can do whatever. That's just what I would recommend to start with. Again, you can still always change it later. So I'm going to use the baseball as my falling sprite. Next, like we have been doing, we're going to go ahead and click back on Sprite 1, the default cat, and go ahead and click the delete button on it. That way we're left with just our falling sprite. Next, if you'd like, we'll go ahead and add a background to it to make things a little more interesting. To do so, bottom right corner, choose a backdrop, and you can choose whatever you'd like in here. So since mine is a baseball field, I'm probably going to go with that. So now I have my baseball on the baseball field, and we are ready to go ahead and start programming. And if any time I'm moving a little bit too fast, remember you can always pause the video and go back and get help that way. So we're going to go ahead and start our programming. Make sure that our falling sprite is selected. We are going to go into the Events tab and use the when green flag is clicked. That way nothing is going to happen until we start our game. We're then going to go into the Motion tab, take the Go to Random Position, and put it under the when green flag is clicked. This is going to make it so whenever you start the game, the object that's falling from the sky is going to go to a random spot, and that way it's not just going to continuously fall from the same spot over and over again because that wouldn't make it as fun. Once we have that done, we're going to go to set y to. Your number here may differ, but we'll change that. So in my case, set y to 144. I'm going to add that under the Go to Random Position. I'm then going to click in the text box here and type in 180. What that is going to do is make sure that this ball on this coordinate system will always spawn towards the top up here. Because if it's just going to random positions and we don't have this, sometimes it may spawn down here at the bottom, which would obviously be impossible to catch. So by doing so, we make sure it stays up here, and it's only going to change in the horizontal axis. Once we have that, we need a forever loop. So we're going to go down into the Control tab, take the forever loop, and place it under our set y to 180. Remember, this is going to continuously do whatever programming that we put inside of this for the entirety of the game. So inside of that, we're going to go back to the Motion tab. This time, we're going to take the change y by 10 in my case. In your case, you might have a different number here. That's okay because we'll be changing it. Be very careful you're using the change y by and not the set y to. We're going to click in the text box for the change y by and type in -5. What that's going to do is the ball is going to fall at a speed of -5. If you don't put the minus sign here, the ball is going to go upwards, which would kind of defeat the purpose of the game. So make sure you're very careful when you put that in there. Next, we are going to go back to the Control tab, and we need the if blank then statement. We're going to then take this, and it is going to go under the change y by -5, but inside of the forever loop. So make sure it's still inside of here. We are then going to go to y position less than 170, which will be inside of our operators tab. So you want to make very sure that you choose this middle one here. So we'll click and drag that, and we'll put it between the if and the then in the statement. Now, you'll want to make sure again that this arrow is pointed to the left and not the opposite way, otherwise it won't work properly. Inside of this text box that says 50, I'm going to click in it, and I'm going to type in negative 170. Make sure you're doing that in the right side. So it should read if blank less than negative 170, then. I'm then going to go back to the motion tab, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Make sure that you scroll down, and here you can either do that with the mouse pad or you can use the little scroller over here. And I'm going to use the Y position. That Y position will go inside of our green statement here. So if Y position is less than negative 170, then. Now, you may want to pause the video and go back and confirm that this is correct, since it can be a little bit confusing, especially at the beginning. But once you've got it, feel free to go ahead and start the video again and we'll move on. Next, back in our motion tab, which we're already in here, if you're still down here, you may need to scroll up a little bit. I'm going to take the go to random position and place it inside of our if-then statement. Lastly, for this set of coding, I need the set y2, in my case 144, again yours may differ, that's going to go under go to random position, still inside our if-then statement. I'm then going to click in the box, whatever number yours may say here, and change it to 180. So now might be a good stopping point to go ahead and pause the video and make sure that your programming looks like this so far. You have one character and a backdrop. Once you've done that, we'll go ahead and move on to our catching object. So in order to create our catching object, we're going to go down here and click choose a sprite. And this is going to be something on the ground that's going to catch whatever you have falling from the sky. So in my case, it may make sense to do like a baseball player or something, or you can do something a little more simple, like a bowl will work well. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the bowl for the sake of this tutorial. Remember, you can always click and drag and move it down here. And if you ever need to make it full screen, this little button will do it up here. I know sometimes people get stuck on here, so this button up here will always let you increase or decrease the size of it. In order to increase or decrease the size of an object that you have, when it's clicked on, it'll say size here. So in my case, it says 100, which is the default size. I can type in 200 and pretty much double the size of it, or I could have typed in 50 and made the size go a little bit smaller. So you can always mess with that there. So next, for our catching sprite, we're going to want to make sure that we have it selected down here and we have a blank set of programming over here. So don't be worried that the old programming disappeared. It's not. We're just not on it. So make sure that we have our new catching object selected down here. We're going to start with the when green flag is clicked as usual. So we're going to go in the Events tab. When green flag is clicked, drag that on in. We're then going to grab a forever loop out of the Control tab because we want it to happen for the entirety of the game. Next, we need an if blank then statement again, as we did before. Drag that on in there inside of our forever loop. We are then going to go down to the Sensing tab, and we need key blank pressed. It might say key space pressed. Yours might be something different. Key space pressed. Drag that on in between the if and the then statement. And I'm going to change this to be the right arrow key. So this block of programming, we are programming the left and right arrow keys to move our catching object to the left and right, back and forth, so we're able to catch our object falling from the sky. So we have if, key, right arrow pressed, then we're going to go to the Motion tab, and we are going to do change x by 10. That'll go in our if-then statement. And if yours already says 10 here, you can leave it. If yours does not say 10, you can click inside of it and type in 10. What this is going to do is allow our catching sprite to move at a rate of 10. Next, we want to do the same exact thing for the left arrow key. So we'll go back to the Control tab. If blank, then we'll go inside of our forever loop, but underneath our previous if-then statement. So make very sure that it looks just like this. We're going to go back to our Sensing tab. We're going to do touching mouse pointer. That's going to go between the if and the then. This time, we're going to use the left arrow key. Or I'm sorry. So we'll go ahead and get rid of the touching. We want the key space pressed. So key space pressed between the if and the then statement. And we're going to change space to the left arrow. So make sure that we just have the right arrow and the left arrow, not the touching. We do not want that. We are then going to go back to the Motion tab, change X by 10 inside of our second if-then statement, but obviously we are going to want the left arrow key to go -10. That way, when we push the left arrow key, it's going to cause the catching object to move in the left direction. So right arrow, change X by 10, left arrow, change X by -10. Next, we need to add some more coding to the object that is falling from the sky. To do that, we're going to want to make sure that we go down here and have it selected. This is the programming that we should be seeing now. So make sure that you are seeing this set of programming and not the catching sprite. We're going to go over to our Events tab and start a new block of programming with the when green flag is clicked. So that's going to go just anywhere else underneath here or to the side. It doesn't matter as long as they're not connected. Go down to our Variables tab, and we need to make a score variable again. So as we did in the previous two tutorials, make a variable, type in score. It'll stay for all sprites, and we'll click OK. We are going to go ahead and take set my variable to 0, and we'll change my variable to score. Excuse me. Next, we are going to take a forever loop inside of the Control tab, drag that under our set score to 0. Inside our forever loop, we're going to use another if blank then statement. Make sure this goes inside of the forever loop. So, when green flag click, set score to 0. You should see that up here. Forever, and then an if blank then statement inside of that forever loop. We're going to then go to the Sensing tab. This time, we are going to take the touching mouse pointer, and this is going to go between the if and the then statement. Now, we don't want it touching the mouse pointer. We want it to be touching whatever our catching object is, or catching sprite. So I'll click on the drop-down and change this to bowl. Now, mine is bowl, but yours might be a different name, and it'll say whatever your object is right here. So just make sure that you're careful of that. Yours may not say bowl, or it may, depending on what object that you use. Next, back to the Variables tab. We're going to change my variable by 1. That's going to go inside of our if-then statement. We're going to change my variable to score. So we're going to make sure that the reads change score by 1, which will be your score as we've been doing. Then up to the Sound tab, we're going to play sound pop until done. This is optional if you want it to make a noise. And again, you can always change the sound if you'd like to record one. After that, back to the Motion tab, go to Random Position. This will go under Play Sound Pop, still in our if-then statement. And lastly, inside of the Motion tab still, we are going to take set y to some number, yours may be different than mine. It'll go under the go to random position, but we're going to change set y to 180. So What this whole block of programming is saying is when you start the game, it's going to set the score to 0, and then as long as the game runs, if your falling object is catching the catching object, it will increase the score, it will play a sound, the falling object will then go back to a random position up here at the top to fall again, and set y to 180 is just telling it to make sure that the random position is towards the top of the screen and doesn't let it go down below. So once you have that programming, you can go ahead and click the play button. You'll then be using the right and left arrow keys to move your catching sprite back and forth, and each time it goes through, your score should increase by 1 point. Now, if you miss the ball and it goes all the way to the bottom, it's just going to fall again and your score is not going to increase. So a fun extra activity, if you feel like you know how to, is maybe find a way that you lose a point if your falling object goes all the way to the bottom of the screen and you don't happen to catch it. You can also always go back and change the speed that the ball is falling to make it a little bit more difficult by increasing this change y by -5. So if I were to change this and do something like -15 and hit play, it's going to fall a lot faster. And you may also want to increase the speed that your catching object can move back and forth by going to the programming down here and changing the change x by and increasing that number. So that's all for the third tutorial, and we'll see you in the fourth one.